Hey guys, it's Rachel. It is Thankful Thursday, and today, although it's Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and it was here in the UK last week and this week in the States, I wanted to do a video on self-injury because it is the March the 1st, which is Self-Injury Awareness Day, and all the other girls are doing a sterling job of doing videos on eating disorders, and I will do one tomorrow. But as Thankful Thursday, because it falls on March the 1st, I figured that I was probably, it would be a good idea to make a video. So, yep, it's Awareness Day. Self-injury still isn't really something that is talked about, certainly not in the same capacity as eating disorders are now. And whilst I'm aware that there are organisations, charities, groups, etc., that are focused on self-injurious behaviour, it still isn't talked about. There's still a lot of shame to it, and I'm not saying that that doesn't exist within an eating disorder, because self-injury exists within an eating disorder in a number of ways, I guess, because behaviours of an eating disorder can be seen as being self-injury. So if you are somebody who binges, purges, abuses laxatives, overexercises, starves themselves, that can be seen as self-injury. Outside of that, there's obviously other self-injury behaviours, and that's kind of what I wanted to focus on. Not because I'm saying that those eating disorder behaviours are not self-injury, but because I want to look at self-injury outside of the context of eating disorders, even though it exists within it. I began self-harming about 2 years into my eating disorder. It was something that happened suddenly. I certainly wasn't prepared for it. I didn't really even know what it was when it happened, but it was obviously something that I felt helped me at the time, which is why I continued to do it. And I guess, like any bad habit, any addiction, any coping mechanism, any destructive behaviour, it very quickly became something that I relied on all the time. Everybody's experiences with self-injury are going to be different. Everybody's means and ways of coping using self-injury is going to be different. And all I can maybe offer you today is some awareness of what some behaviours of self-injury are, and to discuss my experiences with self-injury and how I overcame it. I no longer self-injure at all, zero, zilch, I never self-harm anymore. So in that regard, I'm completely recovered from it, in the same way I am from my eating disorder, being that I'm completely symptom-free of all of those things. And it's not just behaviourally that I'm free, it's in my head that I'm free from it. I had some very difficult news a number of weeks ago, and for the first time in a very long time, there's a kind of flash in the pan idea that, oh well, you used to self-injure when things used to get like this, and that was literally as far as the thought went. I had no intention of self-harming. I wasn't even thinking about self-harming. But when reflecting on very difficult feelings, you sort of do remember the times that you used the means of coping. And that was one of those for me, because it was a very difficult time. It's all connected to university. And I thought, at one time this would have completely destroyed me. This would have been something that I would have just fallen down a really deep hole with again. Self-injury came very impulsively initially for me. It was something that happened when I was in a very negative place. And yet at the same time it was very calm. A lot of people say that they are impulsive, kind of manic self-harmers, in that it happens when they're in an incredibly heightened state of anxiety, distress, and what have you. And I don't know whether that is more common, or the way I experienced self-injury is more common. I was a very calculated self-injury. It was something I always planned. It was something I always knew when I was going to do it. Obviously things escalated to the point where it wasn't planned, because it was just something that I did. And in the same way that we can maybe plan to use behaviours in an eating disorder, so we might take advantage of the fact that nobody's going to be in for dinner, which means we don't have to have dinner, we could maybe think, well, everybody's going to be out this morning and I'll self-harm. But it also it takes on a life of its own in that you can't control it, you are using it every day, and that's basically what happened to me. The initial scars from self-harming on my arm were calculated, they were done in a certain way, they were done in freeze. That was how I used to cut myself, in freeze. There's very, where my scars are, it's very straight, I guess is the word to use, because it was very sort of planned. There are areas on my arm which were more impulsive, frustration, you know, sort of grabbing anything. But that only happened a handful of times. Most of the time I knew exactly what I was doing, knew exactly what I was using. I also had scars on the tops of my thighs. They're some of the most obvious scars I had, because I went through a period when, to cope with every day, I told myself I needed to self-harm in 3 different places on my leg, and that then everything in the day would be okay. And obviously everything in the day wasn't always okay, but in my head I'd created this kind of distorted situation whereby through self-harming I was going to prevent bad things from happening in the day, and bad things did happen, but I still had this belief. It was kind of like a superstitious belief that if I didn't do that, how on earth would I cope with the day? And if I did do it, I probably could cope with the day, or I was more likely to cope with the day. And as that progressed, it then became something that I couldn't control. I didn't even think about it. I have flashbacks now, and I remember I just woke up, I sat on my bed. I remember exactly how I used to do it. It's crazy. And that became a way of coping for a very, very long time. When I say a very long time, I only self-harmed for about 9 months, repeatedly, during the period of 2002. I don't even think it was 9 months, 6, 7, maybe 7 months. But it was something I did very often and quite severely, and so I am left with scars under here as well. And my means of self-harming were self-cutting. People use different means of doing that. I used razors, and I used to always burn myself with matches. And they were my main ways of self-injury. Other people have different ways of self-injury, and with regards to remaining scars, they were the self-injury behaviours that scarred me. There were times when I went into recovery, when I was initially hospitalised, I did stop self-harming, and it was a very black and white thing. It came out in hospital obviously that I'd been self-harming. My family found out, my friends found out. They already had an idea before that, but it was something that was very secretive. That was around the time I started to feel not comfortable with the fact that people could see my scars, but like at least at home, I didn't feel such a pressure to hide it from them. And actually it made me accountable, which might sound very challenging and very overwhelming, but by people seeing my arms, it made me accountable to the fact that if I suddenly then was covering them up, that they would be aware of perhaps what was going on. What followed after a long period of not self-harming was a period of dissociation and dealing with flashbacks and hallucinations. And they're some of the worst scars I have because they happened when I was severely dissociated and therefore feeling nothing, which all of those needed medical attention. Now, probably a lot of my self-injury could have required medical attention, only certain parts of it did, and I didn't ever go to A&E with it. I would see the nurse at my local GP surgery. I was fortunate enough to have a nurse who was actually incredibly supportive. Don't be afraid to go to A&E. Everybody's experiences are going to be different, and if you need treating, you need treating. And there's also the option of walk-in centres where you're maybe more likely to see a nurse who could potentially be more understanding. Hopefully having this video out here is giving awareness to the issue itself, and that, you know, people do need support with it, and they don't need to be told that this is the most ridiculous thing that they've done. They need to be told that it, you know, it's a very painful way to hurt yourself. It's very hard to see somebody who's done that to themselves, but it is also, at the end of the day, a means of coping, and we can't judge somebody for that. We can only encourage them to try not to do that, because as as you know, I know my family and friends really struggled with it, and when I've had other people who I love struggle with it, it is very, very difficult. It's very, very painful. Even now, when I see people I care about, when I see their scars, it pulls on me a little bit. And despite my own scars, it's hard to think that person's been in that place. So that was one kind of period of self-injury I went through. I also went through a period where I would hit things, so I was hitting walls, bruising my hands, I was hitting my head, banging my head, hitting my body, bruising my body, my legs, my head, my face. That was very uncontained. That was periods where I literally just had complete breakdowns and I didn't know what else to do, and it was like this uncontrollable urge to just hit out. It wasn't even I wanted to hurt myself. It wasn't like I want to hurt myself. It was like I just had this need. And again, it's that same compulsive need to do something, to get something out of you. In the same way you might need to purge or cut yourself, it was that way of getting something out of me. And other aspects then of self-injury can be to do with overdosing. I've tried to kill myself on 2 occasions. However, I've taken copious overdoses of paracetamol, sleeping tablets, anti-anxiety medication. God, I took overdoses of my normal medication when I was on things like lithium. You know, it's dangerous, and I many times didn't get myself checked out when I would pass out on the floor having been vomiting because of the medication I'd taken, not being checked out, not telling anybody. And my only advice right now is if you can't go to a professional, it's to talk to somebody, whether you're in a self-harm group, whether you could talk to somebody like me. I of course will advise you in a way of sort of, I think you should get yourself checked out, but I also understand if you're not in a place to be able to do that. So that's kind of a roundup of the experiences I've had with self-injury. It is something that's very difficult to overcome. It's something that more often than not isn't something you can just reduce. It isn't about, or when you cut yourself, just don't cut yourself as deeply. It doesn't really work like that. What can be done, and what for me by using distraction techniques, is by maybe trying to jot down when you have self-harm what perhaps triggered you self-harming, and looking at ways in which you can use the behaviour less. Could you step outside even if it's 5 minutes, you still self-harm. Don't see that as a failure. You've got to understand that if at any point in your recovery from your self-injury that you are having a dialogue in your head of this isn't really, this is what I need to do, this is what I feel I need to do, but there's this sort of nagging saying you don't need to, or your best friend's always saying that, you know, you don't hurt yourself. The fact that there's any dialogue there shows that you're making changes, okay? It shows that you've made a conscious effort to go from self-harming in that way. So allow yourself to have that dialogue. Count your successes, not your failures. I know that that's quite a famous quote, but do try to look to what has been successful, and to look at the fact that you are trying to make choices and you are trying to be in control of something. So definitely focus on the opportunities you've given yourself to try to distract yourself from hurting yourself. Know that it's possible to recover from. Know with enough persistence and support that you can recover from it. It's something I no longer ever do. In the same way I'm completely recovered from my eating disorder, I am from my self-injury. And keep putting the message out there that this happens, because the more material that's out there that this is going on, the more educated hopefully professionals are going to be, which means that you're going to be treated in ways that are actually helpful to you and not unhelpful to you. If family and friends are more aware of what's going on, it means it's more support for you, it means it becomes more acceptable, as it were, socially acceptable for you to bring that topic up. And try and use today and maybe the rest of this week to put this video out there and to just highlight the issue of self-injury. Take care of yourself, and you will get a video from me tomorrow, focus on eating disorders again, but today I just wanted to make it about self-injury. Okay guys, see you tomorrow. Okay, bye!